Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Vidya, Assistant Professor at Crystal Jayanti Institute of Management. And in today's video, we are going to discuss about capital structure theories. Now, before we discuss about theories, let us understand what a capital structure is. A capital structure is generally the combination of the long-term financing. That is a composition of a company's long-term finance, which is generally made up of a mix or a proportion of a firm's debt and equity. Now, you might ask why only debt and equity? Are there not any other sources of long term finance? There are other sources of long term finance, but generally, the major sources of a long term finance are debt and equity, right? Now, let us look at what are the factors that influence a capital structure. The growth and stability um, of sales of a company influence the capital structure of an organization. That is, if a company's growth is quite stable, they are making better profits, and therefore that increases the value of the capital structure or value of the firm. Similarly, the cost of capital. Now, what do you mean by cost of capital? It is nothing but how much you are paying in order to source your long term finances. Now, in order to source debt, you generally are going to pay interest. That becomes the cost of capital. Now, if you're talking about equity financing, you have to pay dividend. That becomes the cost of capital again. Then we talk about retaining control. Now, this is somewhere related to growth and stability of sales. If the company is able to be stable in their sales and it grows on a year to year basis, the profit is going to increase and they can retain more of their profit. Right now, once they retain profit, their dependency on external sources of capital is going to decrease. So that's how it affects or influences the capital structure. Obviously, the size of the business enterprise, bigger the enterprise, more the capital structure, or that is what more finance is required. Then we talk about the requirements of the potential investors. This is somewhere related to the cost of capital. Now, say, for example, an equity shareholder, if he demands more um, dividend, then your retaining control is going to reduce. Now, this is how the capital structure gets influenced. Obviously, the legal considerations that a company has to maintain also influences the capital structure. Then we talk about the external sources, that is the capital market conditions, the inflation rate, the various kinds of risks that are there, like the finance risk or the interest rate risk. Or now we also talk about foreign exchange risk and etc. because long-term financing can also come from foreign quarters, right? Moving ahead with the theories. When we have to discuss about theory, we have to discuss something about an optimum capital structure. What do you mean by an optimum capital structure? It is defined as that combination of debt and equity, that is the perfect amount of debt and the perfect amount of equity that is going to maximize the total value of the firm and minimize the cost of the capital. Moving ahead, when we talk about the theories of capital structure, we have two theories, namely the relevance theories and the irrelevance theories. Now, the relevance theories state that the capital structure influences the value of the firm and the cost of capital, and therefore there is an optimum capital structure under which we are going to discuss about net income approach and the traditional or the intermediate approach. And what do irrelevance theories state? They state that the capital structure has no relevance and does not influence the value of the firm. What is going to influence the value of the firm then? Of course, the sales and the profit that the company is going to make. Now, under the irrelevance theories, we will discuss about the net operating income approach and the approach, also called as the Modigliani-Miller approach. Moving ahead, let us talk about the net income approach. Now, we know we are discussing the relevance theory, so obviously there's going to be a relationship between the capital structure and the value of the firm. Now, the capital structure is going to influence the cost of capital, popularly known as the WACC, that is nothing but the weighted average cost of capital. Now, weighted average cost of capital is made up of two things, that is cost of debt and cost of equity. Since we are discussing only two sources of finance, we will be discussing about the cost of equity and cost of debt, and this is directly going to influence the value of the firm. According to net income approach, any increase in the debt, that is the debt component, would minimize the capital uh, cost and would increase the value of the firm. Now, what are the assumptions here? A continuous increase in the debt is not going to affect the risk perception of the investors. That means the equity shareholders are not really bothered about the risk of the company because the cost of capital is reducing and the value of the firm is increasing. And another assumption is that the cost of debt is less than the cost of equity. That is, how much you're going to pay to a debenture holder is always going to be less than what you're going to pay to a equity shareholder. Moving ahead, we move on to the traditional approach. Now, what does the traditional approach state? They tell, or the traditional approach states that there is a right combination of equity and debt in the capital structure, at which point the market value of the firm is going to be maximum, right? And it also states that the debt should exist in the capital structure only up to a specific point of time, beyond which any increase in the debt, that is how much ever you're going to increase the debt, that is slowly going to reduce the value of the firm. Now, why this is going to happen is because the equity shareholders will start perceiving a financial risk. Now, why a financial risk? We all know that when debentures are involved in the capital structure, the company has to pay interest whether they are earning profit or not. And from that point on, the expected rate starts increasing. The equity shareholders will also start demanding more of dividend, and therefore the WACC, which started first decreasing, will start increasing after that particular point of time. Now, that is all about the traditional approach. Moving ahead, we are going to discuss the irrelevance theories, under which the first one is the net operating income approach. Now, this is a continuation of our intermediate approach, which states that the benefit that a firm derives when they start increasing the debt is going to be negated by the simultaneous increase in the required rate of return by the equity shareholders. Right. So what happens is, with the increase in debt, as I already mentioned, there is a risk that is associated with the firm, which is the financial risk, or it is also called as the bankruptcy risk. That is, whether a firm earns profits or not, it has to pay the interest, and that becomes a financial burden for the organization. So, as such, what happens is the shareholders start perceiving a risk, their expectations start increasing, and they also start demanding more dividends. Now, talking about the assumptions of the net income approach, here the overall capitalization rate is going to remain constant irrespective of how much debt are you going to use. Okay, so at any given point of time, the EBIT, that is the earnings before interest and tax, divided by the value overall capitalization rate, is going to give you the value of the firm. Now, the value of equity is obviously going to be the difference between the total firm value and the value of the debt. And your weighted average cost of capital is going to remain constant, but with an increase in debt, the cost of equity also increases, and slowly the weighted average cost of capital also starts increase. This is all about the net operating income approach. And the last approach that we are going to discuss is the Modigliani-Miller approach, which states that the value of a company does not depend on how it is financed, whether it is debt or equity, or what proportion of debt or equity is used. It always depends on how much profit the company earns from its business operations. So whatever the business operations are, if a company is able to make better profits, that is what is going to influence the value of the firm and the cost of capital, and not the capital structure. So a quick recap of what we saw in this particular video. We spoke about what a capital structure is, what are the factors that influence the capital structure, and what an optimum capital structure is, and the four different theories, two of which fall under relevance theories and two of which fall under irrelevance theories. That's all for now. Thank you very much.